And welcome to tonight's edition of the One Hood Power Hour. I am your co-host, Kahari Mosley, here with Miracle Jones, as well as our ASL interpreter, Kat. Um, Thank you so much for joining us for another Monday. We are taking a 1-week hiatus from our spring candidate series to talk about some important community issues. Miracle, you want to talk a little bit about what we'll be focusing on tonight after we go through a number of headlines. And, we know there's been some real headlines. But before we get to the headlines, let's let folks know what we will be focusing on.
Yes, like Kari said, there's a lot of stuff happening, and we know that we're getting ready to go full swing into the election. But here in Allegheny County, there is a couple of issues that's been happening. One has been, the ongoing investigation to the murder of Peter Spencer, as well as tomorrow there is going to be some legislation introduced that would actually create legalized discrimination against trans athletes in Pennsylvania. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that with our guest, as well as some the Transgender Day of Visibility that's happening this Thursday. Usually we are having forums, but when breaking news happens, we also want to take a moment to give space to our community members so they can actually come in and educate the community about what's happening and get people involved and organized. So that's what we're trying to do today. And again, like Kari said, there's a lot of stuff happening in the world and the news of politics. So I'm going to let him run down what's happening with some local elections and some very surprising turn of events that has happened in the past 48 hours.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I want to start off with was on the national side. There's really been a lot of focus from the January 6th committee, and we've been talking about the January 6th committee, um, you know, numerous times since they convened to investigate what happened on January 6th. And, recent revelations have shown that Supreme Court Justice, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, Ginny Thomas, a very long time conservative activist, was found to have been, communicating with Mark Meadows, former President Trump's chief of staff, um, and really, in those text messages, really appearing to echo and kind of parrot a lot of the disinformation that was going around about the results of the 2020 election in those days after the votes were initially tallied and the race was called for Joe Biden. And people are drawing a correlation to a number of Supreme Court decisions that were made in reference to either the 2020 election or the insurrection on January 6th. And each time Justice Thomas, voted either, in support, of Trump's challenges to the election, or voted to, prevent certain presidential records from being investigated by the committee that is looking into January 6th. So, there's a lot of questions about how much did Clarence Thomas know about Ginny Thomas's activities in reference to the January 6th, and how much he knew it, and whether he should have recused himself before weighing in on any of those decisions, given the proximity of his wife was to those activities. So, Miracle, as our resident jurist, I would be really interested to hear, your thoughts on these latest revelations with Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and his wife Ginny Thomas.
Yes, and so a part of the issue is that as a judge, you're supposed to like remove or limit the appearance of impropriety, and being married to someone who has a vested stake in a case that you're ruling on can actually sway your opinion. And because it wasn't disclosed, that's one of the biggest issues, that he didn't disclose that his wife was involved in some of these activities. That's the first thing. The second thing is, because he is a Supreme Court justice, the rules are a little different. He's technically supposed to recuse himself from some of these cases, but there's no law really mandating that he has to. Albeit some more information coming out to show that he has direct conflicts. And so this is going to cause a lot of conversation, because we know right now, again, with the confirmation hearings, Judge Jackson has already said that she'll recuse herself from any type of hearings or opinion requests regarding anything from Harvard, because she was on the board for the board of Harvard. And so what we're going to have to be watching is what else comes out of this committee. Apparently, they are going to be interviewing Ginny Thomas. Not a lot of information will probably come out, because she'll probably plead the fifth. And so as this investigation continues, it's going to be very important to see what information comes out, if there's any messages referencing Justice Thomas, if that is brought up at all. And that would give a little more groundwork to actually have the Senate force him to recuse himself. So it'll be interesting to see.
Absolutely, I will definitely, continue to keep our eye on that. And not one other thing, but one of the many things that we're going to be looking at, obviously, is the candidates running for General Assembly, and over 184 candidates have announced their candidacies. And just to take a deep dive into a number of those key races, one that stands out up in the Northwest, longtime state rep Pat Harkins is going to be challenged by former NAACP president and current county councilman Andre Horton, which should prove to be a very, very interesting race. And more locally, the Pittsburgh area, Arion Abney and Glenn Grayson have filed for the primary in the 19th district. In the 20th legislative district, you have incumbent Emily Kincaid being challenged by restaurateur Nicholas Mastros out of Ross. And interestingly enough, also in that district, filing as a Republican, Tony Moreno. And we need to confirm whether that is the Tony Moreno that ran for mayor last year, but it is the exact same spelling. And I do believe that he lives in that area where he will fall into the 20th legislative district. You have in the 21st legislative district, you have Sarah Enamorado being challenged by Frank Perman. Dan Frankel will not have a challenger in the 23rd legislative district. In the 24th legislative district, it appears that William Anderson, Latasha Mays, Martell Covington, Randall Taylor, and Perlina Story Nelson will be running in the 24th. And that kind of rounds out a number of the districts that we will really be focusing on, other than the 34th legislative district, where you have Summer Lee and Abigail Salisbury running. And then in the 35th district, also running for Lieutenant Governor, Austin Davis, also running for his 35th legislative district seat, being challenged by Donald Nevels out of Clareton. And in the 36th district, you have Jessica Benham being challenged by Stephanie Fox. And yesterday we had the Democratic endorsement here in Allegheny County, and definitely was a number of interesting results. For example, Nick Mastro defeated Emily Kincaid, the incumbent, as well as Abigail Salisbury defeated Summer Lee. But in the 14th Ward, Independent Club, Summer Lee did get the nod for Congress, and Connor Lamb got the nod for the United States Senate. So as we've seen throughout this political cycle, the endorsements have been a little bit all over the place. No candidate has really been able to solidify, all the support. The support has really been, spread around numerous candidates, regardless of the office that we're talking about, whether, local state offices or the statewide offices that candidates are running for. But all the candidates can boast some level of significant support. Miracle, any thoughts about the most recent list of candidates who filed? And I guess one thing we should make clear is that just because candidates have filed today means they are going to be on the ballot. So there's going to be about a week period where candidates can challenge the petitions of candidates, and I would not be surprised if we see a lot of challenges given the truncated circulation period. It was about half the normal a period of 21 days that candidates usually have to circulate petitions. So you cut that period in half, it does make getting that 300 signature threshold much more difficult. But Miracle, any initial thoughts on the candidates who filed today, or the results of yesterday's Allegheny County Democratic Committee vote?
Yes, it's going to be a very interesting election. Again, I know people, every time they hear the word unprecedented, they cringe a little bit at this point. Well, this is really an unprecedented election for us here in Pennsylvania. So, the majority of the races this year are going to be competitive, which means that a lot of people are going to have challengers. So, on the Democrat and Republican side, a lot of these races are going to be contested, not only during the primary, but also during the general election. So gone are the times where we'll know who actually is going to hold the seat on the primary election day. And so what we're also seeing is an increase in people turning out and running for office. For the past couple of years, there has been a call being put out to people to make sure that the elected offices are more diverse, more reflective of everyday Pennsylvanians. And so a lot of people heard that call and are running. I was talking to a couple of people who were down in Harrisburg dropping their filing documents off. There were a lot of people. It was busier than normal, even though we were having a little bit of a snowstorm at the same time. But people were out dropping off petitions. A lot of people are really, really geared up, and this is something that is surprising because this is supposed to be an off year, and this is supposed to be a year where people aren't really involved and invested in elections. And we're seeing, even outside of the lieutenant governor's race, the senator's race, that these these Commonwealth legislative houses are really going to be the driving force for this primary and November election. So it's really great to see the turnout. It does make it a little bit difficult for us to do our jobs, but it's really great to see that people are really participating in democracy, and we get a little bit of different voices and opinions come November.
Thanks, thanks so much for that insight. And there's also 57 candidates running for state senator. Not nearly as many you know challengers. There's not as many competitive races, so to speak. State Senator Art Haywood does appear to have a Republican challenger in the 4th District of Philadelphia. Um, it looks like Lindsey Williams has two Republican challengers in the 38th District. In the 42nd District, Wayne Fontana appears to not have an opponent. So again, it looks like the Pennsylvania State House is going to be a lot more action in those elections than in the Pennsylvania State Senate. But we do have in the chat the link to PA Politics handy one page online listing of candidates running for state house and the candidates running for the Pennsylvania State Senate. So yeah, there's a lot going on in in the world. We got Ukraine. We had the Oscars last night. So there's been a lot that folks have been talking about, not only in the world of politics, but you know, current events, and all that fun stuff. So we also want to thank Cameron for joining us and assisting us as our other ASL interpreter. So as we pivot from politics to current issues and current events at the local level, Miracle, help us segue into our next segment this evening.
Yes. So a few months ago, a lot of us were really shocked to learn of the news about the murder of Peter Spencer. He was an individual from the East Liberty area who was murdered on a camping trip. And ever since then, we've been getting information and coming down about what happened, what transpired. A couple of weeks ago, the district attorney in Venango County came out and announced they weren't going to pursue any type of charges in this case. And a lot of people were left with a lot of questions. And today, the family's attorney, Paul Jubas, along with Sarah Wett, held a press conference responding to that decision, but also raising a lot of issues that are cause for concern to wonder why the Venango DA made the determination that he did. And so, just to give us a little more clarity to talk about some of the next steps and how we can support the family, we're going to welcome to the platform Attorney Paul Jubas.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us. So jumping right into it, can you give us an update on kind of where things stand, and then give us a sense of the key points that were covered in today's press event?
Yeah, no problem. So like Miracle had said a number of weeks ago, the Venango County District Attorney, formally made the decision that he would not be charging anybody with the murder of Peter Spencer. One individual was identified as the suspect. That was his former coworker who had invited him out there. This did not come as any sort of surprise, the decision. What it seemed like, it was much more of a situation where they had already made their mind up. When you, as law enforcement, you come upon a murder scene, there's illegal guns, there's illegal drugs, there's alcohol, and there's a dead body with 9 bullet holes in it, and there are 4 or 5 other people there. None of them are injured. When you make the decision to not charge anybody with anything right away, the writing is on the wall. It was very clear from the jump that something very wrong was happening in Venango County. It's why so many people across the nation immediately hopped onto this story and noticed that something just didn't smell right here. And it was unfortunate, just as a lawyer, to watch the Venango County District Attorney's response, because it was just completely hollow. When you have our self-defense laws are predicated on the idea that no criminality was involved. A lot of criminality was involved. It was not just a crime scene, but it was a scene of criminality generally. So the idea that this individual would be able to, cite self-defense is just asinine. It doesn't exist. But you have a district attorney who just, jumped through a lot of hoops by playing the, racist American playbook. Well, we got a black guy, we got a bunch of white people, so we're just going to put all of the guns and all of the drugs on the black guy, and nobody's going to notice, and that's what we have here. And it was so transparent. It's not as if like they didn't even try to, be creative with it or to hide the fact that their witnesses were caught lying. They were just like, oh no, it's all Peter Spencer's, so what was so strange about it was getting the evidence that we were able to after the news conference, their news conference. I can't get into the details because it is an ongoing federal investigation and state attorney general investigation that we are cooperating with, that we have a lot of hope for. But we got a lot of great evidence, clear evidence, direct evidence, and it made it very clear that the suspect was absolutely involved in criminality out there. So, it's a situation where we were very pleased to see that the feds were not making their decision before Venango County made theirs, because the feds were able to just take that all in. It wasn't this wasn't, the maneuvering, and it was just so sloppy. And so I hate to call it maneuvering, just like the fits that the Venango County District Attorney has gone through to justify this. This is not going to be lost on the high level federal agents and prosecutors that are handling the case now. These people are not stupid like the district attorney thought everybody else would be, that they would just, buy this really insane story with no legal backing whatsoever. So we have, and I'll also say, after dealing with the Spencer family, after dealing with the baby Marcus family, I know what it looks like when law enforcement is just completely blackballing a family, a victim's family. That is not what we are seeing in this investigation. We are seeing respect. We are seeing good policing, good investigation in this case. So when it comes to the Attorney General's office, certainly not when it comes to the state police or Venango County. But so we have, if I was the prosecutor, I have probable cause right now based off of the evidence that we have. So, we believe, the feds have a lot more evidence than we do.
And just to,
so we're optimistic about it.
Just to interject, because you talked about the state, you talked about the feds, and again, because it's an ongoing investigation, there's a limited amount that can be talked about publicly. But can you just talk a little bit about the other agencies that are investigating and what their role is in this whole entire investigatory process?
Yeah, so the ones that were identified by the Venango DA were the ATF, FBI, and United States Attorney General's office and Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. So as to their particular roles, that's a really big discussion. And it's a really interesting discussion because, and I won't get into the whole thing, but just generally speaking, when you talk about local law enforcement in America and Pennsylvania, a lot of the time we'll just use the city cops, for example, Pittsburgh police. We have a number of Pittsburgh police officers who are task force officers. So the city pays their bills, but they're basically feds. So we have that in just about every, and every major city, but every major area where there's a lot of drug dealing going on, there are task force officers. So local cops that are essentially feds. So when they're talking about the Pennsylvania Attorney General being involved, yeah, technically it is a, Pennsylvania Attorney General agent that's involved in leading the investigation, but he is essentially a fed.
And I know that there was some conversation during the press conference about potential hate crimes investigation. Has it been the position of your office that you were requesting this type of investigation, or was that just because of the identities of the parties involved?
So that was, yeah, that was something that the state police does from the jump, and I just want to be very clear to make sure that, like, what happens is, you have the Peter Spencer situation, you had the shooting, makes big news, and right away the Heritage Affairs Office of the Pennsylvania State Police comes in and says, "Don't worry, everybody, we're very sensitive. It is our position, it is our responsibility to ensure that." To investigate any aspect of bias or prejudice, just in case there's a hate crime. It is a complete farce. It was one of the more aggravating and disrespectful aspects of this investigation, and that is saying something. They put, it was the state trooper, and no disrespect to him. That's one of the straight. I generally like the guy, and I think that he did a decent job of doing what he was told to do. As this is a military structure. That's all these guys can do. But his role from a top down perspective was completely fake. They're saying, on one end, they're saying, oh, well, we did work on the Antoine Rose case, and now we're investigating the Peter Spencer case. They don't have any involvement in the investigation. The only involvement they have is to be a middleman between the family and law enforcement, which is unnecessary. In fact, it's disrespectful because there doesn't need to be a middleman. So, he would basically just reach out to us and ask if we had any questions. And if we would ask a question, he would just not do anything with it, or maybe he would talk to somebody about it. And then, they would just not answer him, but it was fake. I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but I can tell you that other individuals that have worked with him on other cases have said the exact same thing. This is just a facade so that the Pennsylvania State Police can trot a young black man out there to say that, oh, well, we're absolutely looking at this from a perspective of racial bias. Meanwhile, it's not. It's just to put the young black man in between the state police and the family. It's really strange and aggravating.
And can you talk about within the limitations of what you're allowed to cover, some of the key things that came out in the autopsy and the other medical examination work that renowned Dr. Cyril Wecht did on behalf of the family and you?
Yeah, so Dr. Wecht, is great. It's just a pleasure to work with somebody that's seen as much as he's seen, and worked on the controversial cases and not back down on the controversial cases. And it's incredible because the guy is still kicking. Mm-hmm. He's still there. He's not missing a beat. So it's just been it's been fantastic to work with him. And I thought that he was able today to poke a lot of holes in their theory of how the shooting went down. But I thought that the most effective and just generally respectful to the public thing that he said today, that Dr. Wecht said today, it was really illuminating, was he didn't argue his perspective or what the findings that he came to. What he did was he just highlighted theirs. He highlighted their coroners and their medical examiner's findings because the district attorney misrepresented them during his press conference. So you have the DA, getting on there and saying that, there were 7 shots to his front and only 2 to his butt. All the other ones on his back were exit wounds. That is not what their autopsy report said. It's just another really strange thing here where, they're really not even trying. This wasn't a situation, and that's why I don't like calling them maneuvers. This is a situation where they weren't even trying to be respectful, weren't even trying to, make intelligent arguments. They were misrepresenting their own autopsy report to make it sound like better for the white guy that killed the black guy. So it was just, one of the things that I didn't touch on, but we will be getting more vocal about this as time goes on. Is, we also, not only do we think that there is, more than ample probable cause just based off of the evidence that we have, but we think that there's ample evidence to, I would say, initiate a corruption investigation into Venango County, but something tells me that there already is an investigation going on into Venango County. So, we think that, as this moves forward, that, the Peter Spencer case should be the straw that breaks the camel's back when it comes to the feds coming down on Venango County with a corruption case.
And so as we wrap, can you just talk a little bit about what are some of the next steps? I know you can't predict the future, but just because you mentioned some of the other investigations, what are some of the things that we're waiting for? And has the family expressed to you any demands that they would like to see from the community?
So at this point, given that there is an open investigation, I've advised the family, and I know they have some family advising them. It's just generally good advice, given just the traumatic nature of all of this and the things that they've had to learn. They had to learn a lot of things that they would prefer to have not have. And it was just there have been a number of events where they just had to relive it all over again. So given that they are cooperating actively, this isn't just root on the sidelines. This is a family that is actively cooperating with this investigation. We're they're pretty much just going to take a time out, sit down, trust the process, which is a very difficult thing to do in this country, but sometimes you have to. So they're doing that. When it comes to the community, that's a challenge. That's what the family is going to be doing. But when it comes to the community, we have to take on the feds in a respectful way, without attempting, because we Miracle, we have a responsibility, to this system, as attorneys, and we have to make sure that, as this goes on, whatever forum it takes, that we are protecting the integrity of the investigation while simultaneously demanding, justice. So not try, how do we push without putting too many details out in public, but also demanding as much transparency as possible. One of the interesting things about this is that this has scope. So the investigation isn't just limited to a couple of people. So how much time is it going to take? These investigations can last years. Is this a situation where, we're demanding that, it be handled differently than a typical, investigation like this because of the nature of the Peter Spencer case? As community voices and leaders, it's a conversation that we have to figure out how to attack the feds, pushing them, but supporting them, while also, demanding some action from Cindy Chung. I think Cindy Chung she's been on the sidelines since she's come into Pittsburgh. And we've had not just scandal. Jim Rogers, Peter Spencer. And so far, the most powerful player in the entire system around here is just staying quiet. And they're I believe, and that's going to be one of my goals, is to get her onto the field and get her to start speaking up about these cases. Western Pennsylvania, we've had a corruption problem around here for a long time. So it would be good to have Cindy start to, give us some leadership from the United States Department of Justice.
Well, Attorney Paul Jubas, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with us. I know you had a busy day, and good luck to you and to the family.
All right. Thanks, Miracle. Thanks, Kahari.
Thanks so much for joining us. And again, that was Attorney Paul Jubas, a representative of Peter Spencer's family, the man who was gunned down in Venango County late last year on a hunting trip with coworkers. So thank you so much for that, Paul, for that update, as well as the work that you do in the community. So, Miracle, now we're switching gears from the Peter Spencer situation to the Trans Day of Visibility. So can you talk a little bit about what that is and who will be joining us for our final segment this evening?
Yes, the Trans Day of Visibility is a day where people take the time to uplift and amplify and support people of trans experience. And that was intentionally, what Thursday was going to be. But unfortunately, tomorrow, the House Committee here in Pennsylvania is going to be discussing HB 972, which is the bill that would actually ban trans women and girls from participating in sports. And so, as the community is trying to get ready to celebrate on Thursday, they unfortunately are also preparing for this battle that has been taking the nation by storm. And so, from Trans YOUniting, as well as people who are involved in various organizations, we want to welcome to the program a London Love, Chauntey Porter, and Remy Black from Trans YOUniting.
Hi.
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 Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I know I gave a little brief synopsis, but coming to you, Remy, can you just give us a little bit about the importance of Trans Day of Visibility, and what was your mindset going in to planning for Thursday before we talk about the legislation?
Yeah, I should first start by saying that I'm actually not with Trans YOUniting. I'm with Central Outreach Wellness Center here in Pittsburgh. So I am actually not involved in the planning specifically of that action. I will be speaking at the action on Thursday. So I can speak a little bit broadly and generally about the importance of Trans Day of Visibility. I think that there is a concerted effort in this country and really globally that we've seen really re-energized in the last couple years to invisibilize trans people. And it's really a larger conversation about where it is appropriate for trans people to be seen. First, it was kind of started with the bathroom. We don't want trans people seen in bathrooms. And it's really about we don't want trans people seen in public spaces, which then it gets down to we don't want trans people to exist. And so with all of these legislations that are being passed to not only keep us out of sports, out of bathrooms, but to criminalize our medical transitions, to criminalize parents who are assisting their children with medical transition. All of these are really trying to get at erasing through legislature trans identity, which is just so unfathomable to me, because our identities exist outside of the medical institution. Our truths exist outside of the medical institution. And so it's not really something that can be legislated away. All that can really be done is to make our lives even more difficult, which of course then leads to a lot of the problems that we see in the community with suicide, addiction, houselessness, et cetera, et cetera. And so for me, Trans Day of Visibility is a day where we push back and we say, we see you, we see us, we see each other as trans people, and we also see the work that is being done to try to undermine our identities, and we resist that. that. And we celebrate our lives, and we join together to make a statement that we are not going anywhere, that we cannot be erased, and that we have the support not only among ourselves, but even within our community and outside and our allies, to make sure that we continue to fight against this legislation and for the right of all humans, but specifically in this condition, trans people, to simply exist and find a meaningful life in this world.
Thank you so much for that. And coming to you, Chauntey, you have your own, the Love Diamond Project. You've been out and organizing in this region. Can you just talk a little bit about why it's very important that people around the southwestern PA, and particularly in Pittsburgh, are actually out on Thursday and combating a lot of this anti-trans discrimination?
Well, we need to have people understand, first of all, that trans women are women. We need to have people understand that trans people are people, that we are here, just like every other race and culture. It's been an amazing turnout through the allies that the trans community have been receiving, and the support that the trans community has been receiving. However, that's not enough, because unfortunately, when people come to our rallies and things like that, it seems as if they show up, but when they leave, they forget about what they heard and what we spoke about and what they promised to do. And that was to educate other cis people and heterosexual people who aren't educated within the trans about trans individuals and don't understand the struggles and the sacrifice and that we go through on a daily basis. So what I need for people to do is to come out and show up, so they can understand that we as people, as citizens of the United States, of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that we have this, that we deserve to have the same rights as everyone else in society, that we are human beings, and that we deserve to be treated equally and fairly, and most importantly, treated as human beings, which we are.
And coming to you, London, you've been involved with Trans YOUniting and doing a lot of work in the community. Can you just talk a little bit about the organization and how Thursday came to be?
Just a little bit about the organization. The organization, what we do is, we raise awareness for trans folks, and we, excuse me, oh, I'm sorry, I have to sneeze. I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I'm so embarrassed, excuse me.
Oh no, it's totally fine. That's what we're here for. We understand the issues that happen with live a program, and so we'll just wait for London to come back. But while we wait for that, we talked a little bit about this legislation. Coming back to you, Remy, because you talked about trying to remove people from trying to use bills to remove trans people from the community. Can you just talk a little bit about what HB 972 does and why it's so detrimental to athletes in general, but particularly trans women athletes?
Yeah, so this is the bill that is seeking to ban trans youth. Is that correct? Trans youth, and specifically trans women, from participating in sports, right? So yeah, this is important. I was an athlete all throughout high school. Obviously, this was prior to my transition, and what we know about sports in general is that it's about participation. It's about learning those important team building skills, about learning a sense of identity, and being a part of something. And so removing youth, especially from being able to participate in those experiences, really robs them of the benefits of those experiences. And again, it's kind of like I was talking about earlier, that it seems to be intentional, that that's then tied to a negative quality of life, being isolated and removed from the activities that your peers are engaging in. It's also, while I think its aim is inherently transphobic. It also has implications for cis women, because we see this in adult sports where I think it was the Sudanese women, or they were disqualified from the Olympics because their testosterone levels were too high, and you see intersex people also being discriminated against. And it's all for me, it just reveals the artificial nature of the binary that is imposed upon a people who don't naturally fit inside that says that boys fit over here, women fit over here, and yet there's so much gray space, and there's so much to consider what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, especially in the context of trans individuals. And so it seems that for those especially policymakers who are invested in the binary and invested in the status quo, trans identity presents a problem, and it presents a complication because it challenges those very systems that capitalism is built upon. You know, I often like to say that gender is the oldest religion in the world, and when you really break that and you reveal it to be not solid in the ways that it is taught to be, then there's again that pushback. And so that with this bill that we're seeing, you know, it's really trying to start that as early as possible by cutting off trans identity kind of at the root, which would be in youthhood. But it's like I was saying, that's not. You can legislate and you can make people's lives difficult, but you can't stop people from being who they are. It's not like you can legislate trans people into being cis. You can simply legislate trans people into being suicidal. And I'm afraid that that's what these kind of bills will ultimately have the effect of.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Remy. And coming to you, Chauntey, you have been, like I said, organizing and working. You run your own project, and you talked about the failure of allies and cis people to show up for trans folks and to engage. And so, can you just talk a little bit about what some of those policy demands are, and what some of those policy demands will look like to make this region more equitable for people of trans experience?
Okay, so basically, excuse me. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. So basically, for me, I personally feel that when it comes down to the sports situation, piggybacking off of what Miss Remy had stated, I also played sports in high school. And again, me as well, this was before my transition. So therefore, as a feminine gay male, I remember the pushback that I received as a gay male playing football and basketball in high school. So now to be faced with that again, to see that because of who someone is and what they are, being discriminated again and saying that you can't do this and you can't do that, it's sad. And it's really sad, because when we think of what we say our country stands for, the land of the free, who is really free in this country if you can't be who you choose to be? And without being penalized for doing that. So, to being honest, I really don't know too much about the bill that's trying to be passed, and actually all that it stands for. But what I do know is that, and I don't mean to sound rude when I say this, but my main concern is about the youth, because when you look at it, this is our future. And when you sitting here and you're telling a child that they cannot play the sport that they love to play because of who they are and what they are, what do you think that does to their self-esteem? What do you think that does to their sense of identification? This is an individual who's already going through society, some hiding behind a curtain because of who and what they are. Some still struggling with who they want to be, being accepted within their family and among their peers. Now you're having your country telling you, if you love to play basketball and you were born a boy, you cannot play because now you want to be a girl, or whatever sport that it may be. Which that means what we're doing now is we're further tearing down youth. So what it started with is you want to tear down Black youth because of maybe they come from a low budget home, a low income home, or the neighborhood that they come from, and they go to public schools. So now that it goes from that youth. Now you want to target the trans and non-binary youth and say, okay, well, you can't do this and you can't do that. My question to legislation is, where do it stop? And if that's the case, I'm going to speak forwardly with this. Why don't we just face the fact, and why don't you come forth and say what you really speak, what you really want to say? If you're not a cisgendered, heterosexual, white individual, you are not welcome, because that's what it's slowly becoming. That's what it's slowly starting to feel like in United States. It seems like what they really want to do is take us all the way back into slavery, to where they take blacks, trans, and gays and put us all in one place and have us start, living as our ancestors was living in slavery, and that's not right.
Thank you so much for that, Chauntey, and welcome back to London. Can you just talk, like I said, a little bit about Trans YOUniting and the work that you're doing, and a little more information about Thursday?
Okay, sure. Okay, guys, let me first apologize once again. However, just a little bit about Trans YOUniting. Like I said, we raise awareness for our trans folks. We do a lot of things in the community. We do a lot of pop-ups and things like that. There's also we also partner with different organizations as well to help all of our specifically trans folks, but we like to help, non-binary, etc. So everyone under that umbrella. And as far as for Thursday, Trans Day of Visibility, once again, raising that awareness for our trans folks, and also speaking about the discrimination against our trans folks as well. Like Miracle said also about the bill, that I didn't know about the bill actually until today. And me personally, I was blown away. And I was just like, this is the first thing that came to my mind. I was like, this is a target to trans women. This is targeted to us. Period. This is targeted. So, back again to what Chauntey was saying, I think about the youth as well. I'm 25 years old. So, I just came out of high school not that long ago, so I think about the youth as well and how that would make me feel. And it's crazy. But yeah, that's a little bit, sorry, I went a little off, but but that's a little bit about Thursday.
Gahari?
Yeah, one of the interesting things that has come out of this debate was in the state of Indiana, and we posted the article in the chat. But Governor Holcomb, actually a Republican, a governor of Indiana, actually vetoed a similar bill that passed, and actually 11 states that are under Republican control. The most prominent example being Texas, have passed, what they call these transgender sports bills. But in a really unexpected turn of events, Governor Holcomb in Indiana actually vetoed the bill as a Republican, citing, evidence of increased rates of suicide in communities that take, these kind of draconian steps to, as you say, to make trans youth invisible, to kind of erase them from participating in everyday society like everyone else. Any particular thoughts around the table about that, and what do you think that message sends when even Republican leaders around the country are beginning to take steps, and again, Governor Holcomb specifically cited suicide rates among transgender youth as the reason why he opposed that bill.
I'll take that one. I think there's a inherent contradiction to someone who speaks to the value of human life and who also supports legislation like this. And it's a contradiction that really you can't get over, because because we have evidence of people committing suicide when they're kept from being their true selves. And so I think to a lot of conservatives, the idea, they misunderstand trans identity, and so they think that it is a political thing, and so that it's something that can be eradicated from society, just like communism isn't really a factor in the United States of America. You can kind of politically eradicate trans identity, but the reality is it's not a political ideology. It is an identity, in the same way that racial identities, cultural identities, ethnic identities exist. And so in that way, it can't be legislated against. So I kind of love that at least someone was able to come to the realization of that contradiction, to say, wait a minute, okay, I don't think that people should be transitioning. I don't think this is healthy. I don't think this is right. I don't think this is moral. But at the same time, how can I pass legislation that I know will directly contribute to their suffering and ultimately to deaths and suicide? And so for me, it's like the obvious choice should be that we find ways to affirm and value and uplift these people's lives, but they're not quite there yet. So it would be my hope that perhaps this is a step in the right direction, that compassion override that says, wait, we can't be doing things in our own desire to eradicate this transgenderism, which ultimately disgusts us or repulses us. We can't use that as a justification to essentially be someone's death sentence. And so I hope that then leads to, okay, we have no choice but to then pass legislation to affirm and uplift these lives and voices. But that's wishful thinking.
Thank you for that, Remy. And just a quick follow up for anyone who jumps on it. It definitely seems like 2 or 3 years ago, it was more of legislation focusing around the bathrooms, and it seems like 2022, the legislation of the day is more around these sports bills. Do any of you have any thoughts of in particular why the focus now is on sports, where it seemed like 2 or 3 years ago it was like more about bathrooms? What is the interest in focusing on sports around this issue in particular?
I think that, first of all, it is in my opinion that this bill, it truly shows the true ignorance of some of America's leaders. And I say that in regards to not attacking adults is one thing, but when you include children into your attack, that takes it to a whole nother level. As far as sports is concerned, I say this. I believe that it comes not just from some of the sports teams, presidents and the owners of these teams, but some comes from the players also. Because see, it goes back on their beliefs, how they were raised, and just on basically how they see people being different from them. And my question to those people is, regardless of how someone looks, regardless of someone's gender, if a person can play the sport and help you win, what difference does it make who they are and what they are? Because what I don't understand is, if I'm correct, and please correct me if I'm wrong, trans men, this bill doesn't affect trans men. They can play the sport that matches with the gender that they identify with, but it's more targeted towards trans women and trans youth, if I'm correct, trans youth that identify as trans young women. And my thing is that what I've heard from in the past is that it's not fair for someone who was born a man to play sports against other women because of their strength and things like that. And I'm not going to get into the scientific part of the hormone therapy and things like that. But what I ask those legislators as they go and do their research, think about passing this bill, do your research first. Find out exactly what it is the process that takes place when trans women and young trans girls are transitioning. Do your research, as Remy stated. Do your research about the mental health of trans women and trans girls. Once you do this research, you will have a better understanding of what people are going through. Not just the possible suicidal thing, but it also goes with the self-esteem situation. It also goes into how our youth comes up accepting their self, because we have to remember our youth is guided in the direction that we push them in. And if our country is telling our youth your identity is not is going to have people turning their back on you, what direction will our youth take? Where will they go? Because they say that it starts at home, and that's true. You receive the love and acceptance of your parents and your family, but what happens when you step out into society, and now society is looking at you like you're not even from our planet and things like that? There has to be a point within where people say enough is enough. No one's hurting no one. So basically, now I just feel that some people don't have enough to do, where they need to focus on the main issues at hand. And I'm not going to get into politics, but focus on the more important issues at hand of making our country great again, and stop attacking trans women and our trans youth.
Thank you. Back to you, Marco.
Listen, and as we wrap, coming to you, London, can you just talk a little bit about what you would like to see on Thursday? We put the link in the chat, and what you would like for the community response to be in regards to this new round of anti-trans legislation.
Yes, so I would just like everyone to come, show your support. Show your support for your trans friend, any trans person. It doesn't matter. Just come, show your support, be with us, talk to us, and things like that. As far as for Thursday. And I'm sorry, Miracle, I didn't catch your last question totally. I didn't. What was your last question?
And in general.
You said, and in general? And just in general, just support, just once again, just support and raise the awareness, for our, trans people being discriminated against.
Well, thank you so much to London, Chauntey Porter, and Remy Black. London from Trans YOUniting, Chauntey Porter, it's from the Love Diamond Project, right?
Yes.
The Love Diamond Project, and Remy Black from Central Wellness Outreach. Thank you all so much for taking time out this evening to talk a little bit about what we can do for Thursday and how to fight back against this anti-trans legislation. We'll see you on Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, so two very important issues that are very relevant, to the day. Obviously, the Peter Spencer situation that happened in Venango County, and then this Thursday, the Trans Day of Visibility in the wake of a national push for a legislation targeting, in particular, trans youth athletes that has been all over the country. But we just mentioned in a somewhat turn of events in Utah and Indiana, not California and New York, but Utah and Indiana, Republican governors have vetoed legislation that would target transgender youth from participating in women's athletics and young girls' athletics. So thank you for pulling that panel together. I think that was very informative, given the relevance of the issue, and the fact that not only is this happening in Utah and Indiana, but more importantly, there's current legislation here in the state of Pennsylvania as well.
Yeah, and like we said, this bill is going to be debated tomorrow from the House Judiciary Committee. So this is why it's super important. And again, as an organization, we will change our programming up. Like when our community calls on us, we will change our programming up. We'll to get people educated about what's happening and to mobilize turnout, because again, every election season, every election cycle, there's always some type of ghost enemy, and our policy has always been we are stronger together as a community. We don't need to other individuals, and so this is what we see this as. So again, we encourage people to read up about House Bill 972. We have some links in the chat, and to reach out to your elected officials. Again, like we said at the top of the hour, it is an election year. So it does matter who you put in office. It does matter who you are electing to represent you. And again, so we are going to ask people to make sure that you are registered to vote. We have a special election for the 19th, 24th, and 116th legislative districts on April 5th. So the period to register to vote, we're there, and you have, I think, until maybe tomorrow to request your mail-in ballot. If not, you'll have to vote in person on April 5th. But other than that, our election is going to be May 17th. We have lieutenant governor, senators, your city and county council members. And so there's so many people running for office, and there's so many different ways to make a difference to ensure that our most marginalized are not targeted and oppressed. So again, please make sure you are registered to vote. And with that, I'll turn it back. Oh, and remember to subscribe and like on our YouTube page. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Kahari.
Yes, as Miracle said, we are now in the full tilt of the election season. We have today is the deadline to file, so now we know, after really months of uncertainty of who was actually going to be on the ballot, we have a much clearer picture. And this time next week, that picture will be cemented for who will be running in the May 17th primary. So we look forward to continue, the candidate forum series. Look for an announcement in the next day or two of who will be joining us next Monday night. We will be picking that back up, and whether it's some of the local races or some of the statewide races as we get closer to May 17th, we're very excited about continuing these very important conversations. So we're just getting started.
And with that, we want to thank you all so much for tuning in, for joining us. Thank you so much to Kat and Cameron, our interpreters. We hope you have a great rest of your week. We have some really great programming coming up for you with the 100 Media Network, some really cool announcements coming down the next week or two. So make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube and social media pages at 100 Power. And with that, bid you all a great evening. Have a good night.